our guest today is someone who needs no introduction, but we will briefly introduce him anyway. He is the Dean of Mays Business School, Eli Jones. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
We are happy to have you here. How was your weekend?
Oh, it was great. Yeah. A little rainy, but I'm glad it cleared out yesterday. And yeah, we had a good time.
Let's get
it's
right
always
into
too short.
Yeah, well, surely is. Surely is. Let's get right into it. What is your favorite superpower?
Oh, well, I'm a man of faith, so I know of only one superpower.
Okay.
But to have fun, I was thinking of Flash Gordon.
Okay.
Do you remember Flash Gordon?
Yes. Yeah, I'm aware of him.
Right? Okay. So Flash Gordon, what I thought about with respect to Flash Gordon is he was intergalactic. So
right.
He was here, there, everywhere. In a lot of respects, being a dean, I've got to be here, there, and everywhere.
Right.
And I've got to move pretty fast.
Right.
Too. So sometimes I'm called into Houston. I'm back here at the office.
Sure.
Sometimes I go to a meeting outside of the state, and I'm back here in the office. So some of our folks called me a mist because I'm here, I'm across campus, I'm back in and out. It's all over the place. That's why I thought about Flash Gordon.
Is Flash Gordon the one where the soundtrack of the movie is like Flash?
Yes, that's the one.
Okay.
You got it. That's it.
So
that was in the 1930s.
Okay.
So I'm pretty impressed that you know that.
Right. Well, wasn't there was a movie version of it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So let's meet you.
Okay.
Give us the 2-minute version of your career trajectory and bring it around to how you eventually ended up in the
2 minutes. Okay.
Well, I mean,
let's try it.
You can go 3. You can go 4.
So I graduated from Texas A&M in 1982 in journalism.
Okay.
And I pursued broadcast journalism, as it turns out. Had a chance to work at some radio stations here in Bryan College Station, and then ultimately moved to a major market station in Houston, and had a lot of fun doing that. My wife and I got married at that time, and we jumped right into having babies and all. And so I ended up thinking one day, I need a real job. That was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun doing that. I've had a couple of
times myself.
Yeah. And so we actually moved back here for me. My wife is from Houston and with children. And I pursued an MBA here. So I got an MBA and finished in 1986. And then I started my consumer packaged goods career in sales and sales management. And so I started out with Quaker Oats, and I called on a lot of the retail stores in Houston. I was later promoted and called on Randall's Supermarkets, called on the key account there. I also called on Fleming Foods and Safeway, when Safeway was there in Houston. I was later promoted to a zone planning manager, and my wife and children and I moved to Jacksonville, Florida, and I was responsible for sales in 3 states, Florida, North Carolina, and South Carolina, and working with the key account salespeople in those 3 states. Then was later promoted to a key account executive, and we moved from Jacksonville, Florida to Charlotte, North Carolina, and I personally called on Harris Teeter in Charlotte and Bilo in Greenville, South Carolina. Then I was recruited to Nabisco to be a sales manager, and we moved to Greenville, South Carolina. And then I took a lateral move to get our family back here to Texas. I had my eyes on the PhD program at that time. And so we moved back to Houston. And then later I was joined up with Frito-Lay. I was a zone sales manager for Frito-Lay. I had a distribution plant. I had operations people, sales managers. And I suspended my career as an executive, as a sales manager, and then came back here and got a doctorate and finished in 97 and started my 3rd career. And so when I finished in 97 with the PhD, I moved to the University of Houston and joined the faculty there. And I was there for 11 years on the faculty. And I was asked to start the sales center there. So there's the Sales Excellence Institute. I worked with some adjunct professors and lots of staff members, and we built that Sales Excellence Institute. And along the way, I had schools calling me, asking me if I would think about being a dean, which was interesting because I had no idea what a dean does. So I actually, the very first school that called me was Cornell and asked me to think about the hotel and restaurant management school there.
I see.
And so it was interesting. I went through that national search. I came in second, and it was a very close second, without knowing what a dean does. So I ended up taking a little seminar just to understand what deans do. And later on, LSU called and asked me to pursue the deanship there, which I did. And so I became the dean there at LSU. And as a professor of marketing, I am a professor of marketing,
right,
and was able to help them raise money for the business education complex there. That was the biggest project.
Okay.
Plus, we went through reaccreditation and some other things. And then later, I was asked by the University of Arkansas to lead the Walton College. I had the privilege to meet Jim Walton, Sam Walton's youngest son, and it was just an incredible experience. And so my wife and I, we are empty nesters, and we were empty nesters at that time. We moved to the University of Arkansas, Fayetteville, Arkansas.
Okay.
And I was there for 3 years and managed to take that school through strategic planning and work with the faculty and staff. And then I was asked to come home. So my wife and I moved back to Bryan College Station in 2015, and I became the dean of Mays Business School. I'm a graduate of Mays Business School, so it's a lot of fun to be back, and it's a real honor to be asked by the professors who taught me to come back and be the dean.
Right. We'll hold the discussion of what a dean does until a little bit later in the conversation, but what do you think was the most important thing? So a lot of what you spent your time on during that process was sales and understanding the marketing process. What do you think was the most important thing, maybe something that surprised you about sales and marketing and understanding why people buy the things that they buy, whether they're consumers or businesses? Right. What would surprise people among the things that you learned about sales and marketing?
Sure. So I still publish. I actually research and do work in the area of sales management primarily.
Right.
And it really is how to motivate salespeople. So that's my area of specialization. And when I have the opportunity to teach sales and sales management, I approach it from 3 different perspectives. One, I was in sales, so I actually carried the bag. I led salespeople as a sales manager and later a sales executive. Then I had the opportunity to co-author a book. So we have the Selling ASAP, Art, Science, Agility, and Performance book.
Okay.
And I'm able to talk about the research that I'm doing with lots of different companies. So the research that I do is based on real salespeople, real sales managers, and real customers.
Right.
And we're exploring all kinds of research questions around how to motivate salespeople to do X, whatever X is. And so for a while there, I published a few papers on how to motivate salespeople to use customer relationship management software. So you think about it, salespeople are really tasked to call on customers, to go out and build relationships with those customers. And then all of a sudden a company, their own selling company, will ask them to stop and input data into some kind of a database.
Right.
Now, if you're earning money going out and calling on customers and building those relationships and not earning money to stop and put data into a database, that's a real issue for a lot of companies. And so a few co-authors and I explored that particular question, that is how to get salespeople to be motivated to stop and put data into databases.
Right.
And so we studied a whole host of various theories around that particular question. Later on, I started working in the area of how to get salespeople to sell new products. So another question is, how do you get people who have multiple stock keeping units, right? So in my background, I was able to sell various stock keeping units, SKUs, lots of different products, and I called on a key account, and I had only 45 minutes to an hour to call on my buyer. I had to process mentally which stock keeping units I would promote. But if you're the company, in this case, the manufacturer, you want the salespeople to sell all of those SKUs.
Okay.
I had to mentally go through the process and say, I'm going to prioritize and I'm going to promote these products over these products.
Okay.
Right? Over and above the commission I might have been making, I made some decisions. And so we explore, what is that decision-making process? What do you think about? And so in terms of surprises, in my area of research, I'm able to work with companies and uncover all kinds of psychological things that are going on in the minds of the salespeople and the customers. And we find all kinds of surprises. As it turns out, most recently, we've been working on a project. We're working with it's a global firm. And they allowed us to go in and survey their salespeople, their sales managers, and their customers. And we're exploring this idea of a trusted advisor. So when you think about it, some years ago, many sales managers went out and told their salespeople, we want you to be trusted advisors to all of your customers.
Right.
Well, having been in key account sales, I can tell you that that's impossible. It takes a lot of time and effort to build that kind of relationship, a very deep relationship with your customer. All right. And if you have a portfolio of 100 customers, say, it's impossible to build that kind of trusted advisor relationship with 100 customers.
Right.
Right. Because what we found, the discovery was, in those types of relationships, there's this business side.
Right.
There's also a personal side.
Makes
so
sense.
we went out and we called on their top salespeople, interviewed them, and we wanted to understand their characteristics, what motivates them, and how they build these kinds of relationships. And so we're currently exploring the business trust and the personal trust in these buyer-seller dyads, these pairs of buyers and sellers. And now we're exploring, in the midst of this environment that is very turbulent, it's rapidly changing.
Right.
We're trying to understand if you're my buyer, I'm your seller, when we perceive the environment, the market to be very turbulent, changing rapidly, how does that affect our relationship?
Okay.
Does it draw us closer? Does it pull us apart? And we're looking at this business side and this personal side to see what happens when we perceive that all around us, that whole market environment is changing very rapidly.
I wonder if then the change might depend on how things are balanced between the business side and the personal side.
And that's what we're looking at.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's part of this research project that we have underway right now.
Okay.
And it's under review at a major journal. And so we've had an opportunity now to revise the paper that we submitted to a major journal. And we're working through answering some of the reviewers' questions, which can be quite onerous at times.
Of course.
In fact, these reviewers have asked us to collect more data, which we are doing now, to really tease out these very, very specific types of effects, statistical effects in these relationships. So, earlier when we sat down, we were talking about our weekends. And, just this weekend, I talked to 3 of my mentees. Yeah. And I love that. In fact, I had a conversation with one late last night. He's 19 years old.
Wow.
And he's a drummer. He's really, really good.
We're going to come back to that.
Yeah, he's really good. And I gave him my old drum set. So he reached out to thank me and all. And we had a really good conversation about the business of music last night. So he's a great drummer, really good guy. And he's been playing for 18 years or so. I think he started when he was 1. And I had a chance to meet him through some mutual family. At any rate, we ended up talking about the business of music, and we just moved there. I was asking him about the different tours. So he and his dad are going on tour. They are on a little circuit. And so I was asking him about it. And then I was able to probe a bit more to see what he's doing about building the business side of his career. And we had just a simple conversation about expressing gratitude. So he called me to thank me for the gift that I just made to him.
Nice,
but I built on that. So I got him to think about every time you interact with a promoter or someone who's going to help you, be sure to thank them. That goes a long way. And all of a sudden you're building a fan base beyond the music fans. You're building a business base. And so that was just last night. I talked to some other mentees over the weekend. So my phone is constantly ringing. People see me walking around with my cell phone. A lot of times these are mentees that are calling. And so I'm also part of this PhD project. The PhD project, which would start through KPMG. It's a group of mentors. We are academicians, and we're helping underrepresented minorities go through PhD programs. So many times when people see me with the phone in my ear, I'm talking to a mentee who's going through how do I arrive at a dissertation topic? How do I pick a dissertation committee? How do I defend this? How do I do this analysis? And so I'm constantly mentoring others because I got here due to having a lot of mentors.
Sure.
So this is the give back. And I think that we're, to whom much is given, much is required. And that's what this is about.
Yep. That's very, very biblical. You mentioned being a man of faith earlier. Something I noticed this weekend, talking about gratitude.
Yeah.
I did all rideshare this weekend. I didn't rent a car. I was out on the West Coast. And something I noticed, all of my Lyft drivers, that the rideshare process has changed in the last few years. All of my Lyft drivers greeted me by name when I showed up at the car. All of them made interesting conversation, and all of them said thank you at the end of the ride.
Yeah.
And it changed the experience for me. And I don't know if that's something that Lyft is training their drivers to do, or if it's just something that the drivers have discovered. I get better ratings. I maybe get more tips.
Right.
And people seem to appreciate the experience more when I greet them by name. I make conversation. I say thank you. Yeah. And I tried to then so then as a consumer, I wanted to do the same. I wanted to greet them by name. I wanted to make conversation. I wanted to say thank you. Right. And my point is just that gratitude begets gratitude.
It does. We just published a paper 2 years ago now in one of our journals, the Journal of Personal Selling and Sales Management. And this was just one aspect of a larger research project, this one that I told you about, trusted advisor relationships.
Right.
At any rate, we published an article just teasing out the notion of gratitude, expressing gratitude. And we did it in a kind of a dyadic context, and that is buyer-seller stuff. At any rate, we noticed that when we looked at gratitude itself, just gratitude, and the depth of the business-to-business relationships, that gratitude alone could approach the level at which a veteran salesperson calling on a veteran buyer, what that relationship is. So we could take novice salespeople who express gratitude to their buyers,
right,
and look at the strength of those relationships, and look at the strength of those relationships in comparison to buyers and sellers who've been together for a long time. And it was gratitude that built the strength between a novice salesperson and a new relationship.
What do you enjoy doing in your 3 minutes of spare time every week? I saw a note about drums, and specifically, we talked a little bit about another drummer you know. Yeah. You mentioned that he is a great drummer. I think that was what you said.
Yeah.
So you play the drums. Yeah. What do you enjoy about that? And what makes a great drummer? What makes someone like, I know that John Bonham is really well regarded as a drummer. Yeah. I know that Keith Moon, I think, is really well regarded as a drummer. What makes a great drummer?
Exactly. Those guys. Yeah.
Exactly.
So when you think about the rhythm section, all right, and that would be the drums, all the percussion stuff.
Right.
I'd like to believe that we're the heartbeat of the band.
Yeah.
Right. We set the tone, we set the pace, we set that. And I don't know how many people actually know that, but the drummer is setting that tone. All right. In fact, if you walk into my office, I've got this little metal drum set that's right on my desk, and I sit behind my desk, and it's right there in front. Some people ask me about it, but what I tell them is I'm setting the tone. I'm setting the pace. I'm back here playing the drums.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
And I also look at it I'm a professor, so I look at it from weird perspectives. If a drummer has each limb is doing something differently.
Okay.
Each limb. And so from a multitasking standpoint, I've got to have this hand doing this, keeping the pace. I've got this one doing something else.
Right.
I've got my bass drum leg, and I've got my hi-hat leg, and they're all doing something differently.
Right.
And so, I think from that perspective of, multitasking, keeping the pace, setting the pace for the band, I think that's an awesome responsibility.
Sure.
All right. I think music is incredible. I've listened to, and I don't know how much you want to go into this, but I know the importance of music when it comes to spiritual battles, by the way.
Oh.
If you think about musicians in the time of battles, it wasn't that long ago when the musicians would lead into the battle.
Right.
That is the role of a musician.
Well, the phrase "march to the beat of a different drum" is based on the drummer who would set the pace for the army as they marched to the fight.
Right. So I tend to look at music, being a musician, and being a drummer in those ways. And what it means is it's beyond playing the drums. It's in another realm. And I know it's weird, but I see it that way. I've actually observed being a drummer, watching the rest of the band keep up, right? So it's an awesome responsibility. It really is. And so when I think about drummers, other than the technical things that I hear, drummers, the paradiddles, all those things, the technical aspects of playing the drums.
Right.
I also look at those drummers who are also leading the bands. Even if they're not the lead singer, they're back there leading the band. And by the way, I think this is important. They're leading from behind.
Huh. Okay.
And so this is way more than you asked for, but I look at my leadership in that way. So in a sense, I'm playing the drums. I'm kind of helping to set the tone, the pace, right? And I'm leading from behind, because I have a leadership team that's up front.
Right. So
it is more than symbolic. If you walk into my office and you pay attention to what I have on my desk, it's more than symbolic.
Right.
It's really real to me.
So I'm going to get very meta in terms of our show here, because David Wiggins, my brother, who is the VP of Finance now at LGI Homes. I should remember that he's my brother, but I enjoy insulting him, so I'll insult him by forgetting his title. He's the VP of Finance at LGI Homes. He talked about what he called window mirror maturity, and what he's saying. So there is a sense in which, so you lead from behind in terms, and I think where you're going with this is you lead from behind in terms of taking credit.
Right.
But you lead from it for everything that you've said today indicates that you lead from in front in terms of taking responsibility.
Yes.
So
you got it.
So
exactly.
And that's exactly what he talked about in terms of window mirror maturity. When something goes wrong, you're looking in the mirror.
Yes.
When something goes right, you're looking out the window.
Yeah.
And what that all comes down to is leadership is easiest and leadership is at its best when the people who are working with you and working under you feel like you are going to make sure that it goes as well for them as possible,
yes,
regardless of what's happening.
Right. So, and to build on that, this is really good. This is really good. Thank you for bringing this up.
Of course.
To build on that, I see my role as one who can remove obstacles.
Oh.
All right. And I'm very intentional about that. So, I ask people to tell me when they need to call me in. I'm right there. So as they go through different things, different aspects and solving different challenges, I always say, call me when you need me. And when they need me, I immediately go in and I'm trying to remove the obstacles in their paths
Right.
so that they can succeed.
Right.
And I see that as critical in this role.
That's another form of saying yes a lot.
Yeah.
It's when somebody has an idea. I own a small esports business, and it's a fraction of the size of Maze. But what I tell my people is the same thing, which is if you see something that needs doing, tell me about it,
Yep.
and I will. 95% of the time, I'm going to say yes, and then I'm going to say, "What do you need?"
Right.
And then I'm going to say, "Go do it."
Yes.
And
right.
so that I can go to the next person
Right.
and find out what they need
That's
and
right.
how they can go do
Yep.
it.
And I'm doing that all day long.
Right.
It's like a revolving door.
Exactly. So let's talk about family momentarily.
Okay. I'd love to talk about my family.
So you had, and we're going to go out of order a little bit, but I want to come back to this other question as well. But first, you had an exceptional mother. What are the most important lessons you carry with you from her?
Okay. I had exceptional parents.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'll start with my mother, but I can easily go on forever about my dad too. My dad was actually my role model.
Okay.
I had the highest respect. I learned so much from him. He died almost 11 years ago, and my mom died almost 4 years ago. But they left a very strong legacy right here in this community, by the way, my mom and dad. And I love when I'm out in the community and people say something about my parents. That's just, that's such a joy.
You mentioned that briefly. You mentioned that earlier. Did you grow up in College Station?
So was born in Houston,
Okay.
but pretty much grew up in Bryan College Station.
That's great.
Yeah. So, let's start with my mom. So, my mom was just really good at listening, and she valued listening. In fact, she would assess, I have 3 siblings, she would assess all of us on the basis of how well we listened. So she emphasized that more than anything. And boy, does that come in handy. Because when I think about it from a leadership perspective, it's listening at a very deep level.
Sure.
Certainly from a selling perspective, it's listening at a very deep level.
Yes.
And so my mom valued that, and she emphasized it in rearing us, the listening part of that. So that's one that I keep very close to. And she taught me a lot of things, but that was one that I really particularly loved to hear. The other thing is, my mom used to say this. She used to tell me, she used to tell all of us, I don't care if you're a clown, be the best clown. Like, you pick it, whatever that is that you're passionate about, but be the best in that area. And that's what she was really emphasizing. And so she had those kinds of standards, and I really loved it. So she let us pick, our paths, if you will. But she emphasized really become the best at it. Study it, listen carefully, learn what it is to be whatever that is, that thing that you want to be, right? So she emphasized that. She was also a very good role model in terms of how I treat my wife.
Oh.
So my wife and I will soon celebrate 36 years together.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It's coming up next week, as it turns out. 36 years. And we got married as babies. We started having babies, and we were babies. We were trying to figure out our way as we got together. But the way I treat my wife is the way that I watched my mom and dad treat each other.
Yeah.
And so, I'm really proud of that. My dad had a 6th grade education. He was born in Louisiana. He was a successful businessman 3 times over. And I remember asking him one day, because I watched him build a business, sell it, and go to something completely different, a different industry even. And I remember asking him one day, I said, Dad, how are you able to move from this business to this business and be successful? And what he said to me was something I took to heart, and I still practice it. You've got to be able to understand people. That's the common denominator. Because if you're leading, it's all about studying people.
Right.
I'm actually a social scientist, and many of the researchers in this college, we're social scientists. And in many cases, that's what we're doing. We're studying people.
Right.
And I took that to heart from my dad. And I learned a bunch of other things from it too, but we don't have enough time.
So one of the best things about studying and understanding people is that people want to be understood. And it really comes back to, in many cases, it comes back to effective listening, because listening at its best is giving the other person in the discussion permission to be all of themselves and just sitting, in some cases sitting quietly, in other cases engaging with them and asking them more questions about, because really every conversation is answering the question, who are you? And people want to tell you, as it turns out, who they are.
That's right.
And that's one of the reasons that we're here.
That's right.
So what memories have made you especially grateful to be a grandfather?
Yeah. So if you really want to see the real me, you watch me with my grandchildren.
Right.
Yeah. So we have a lot of them, as it turns out. So we have 4 adult children, 13 grandchildren, and so they're pictures of us on Facebook if you want to look at it. So what's special about being a grandparent? One, and any grandparent will tell you this. I didn't make this up. I heard it many times, and now I see it as a truth. Is you can spoil them and give them back. And it's so true. So, as a parent, we're everything to the kids, right? We're the provider, we're the teacher, we're all of that to the kids. And we've got to be the disciplinarian too, right? So we've got to be, it's our responsibility to teach them what's right and what's wrong.
Right.
All of that still carries over when it comes to being a grandparent. You're still teaching what's right and what's wrong as a grandparent. But I decided, and it was a decision, that this time around, I wanted to be just the good cop. That was the kind of grandfather I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And so my kids, they have fun with this, like, what happened to my daddy? Those kinds of things.
Right.
And so that's fun to watch. But when I'm around my grandkids, I'm the fun grandfather.
Right.
So I play ball with my grandsons. I play basketball with my grandsons. I play drums with my kids. And we have a music room, so they play music with me. We just have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of grandfather I want to be. As I want to be the one that they think of when they say, well, I can go and be with my granddad and I can be free. And so by being that kind of grandfather, honestly, my grandkids tell me everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they feel free enough, they feel open enough to talk to me, right? And so I don't make them uncomfortable, right? Now, if there's something that's wrong, I will tell them, but I tell them in a granddad way.
Right.
Right? I start off with how much I love them.
Sure.
And I want what's best for them.
Sure.
And so I kind of talk to them in that way. As a parent, when you're having multiple kids and you're rushing and you're taking them to this place and that place, and I was guilty of that. I didn't always tell my kids, I love you and that's why I'm going to discipline you. I didn't get that across, but I have a second chance at it. And that's what I see about being a grandparent. We have a second chance to get it right.
Interesting. So one more question, and then we'll move to some rapid fire. This is something that I wonder a lot about, as in terms of people who have to speak a lot. So you're, as the face of this organization, you do a lot of speaking. How do you avoid becoming rote? Like, how do you avoid just kind of saying the same thing over again? And especially in terms of, because a lot of what we've touched on today is tied to the values that define Texas A&M. And I feel like, so one of the reasons that I identify with this institution is because I feel like we really do make those values mean what they say. And I've told some of the stories that drove that belief home for me, but I do feel like every institution claims, right or wrong, and many institutions actually are about their values. But how do you avoid a feeling of sort of repetitiveness in terms of talking, in terms of driving that truth home and figuring out different ways to do it? How do you walk that line?
Oh, that's a good question. So one, as a speaker, there should be some level of consistency,
right?
For starters, right?
Sure.
So, and I tell people you have a personal brand, right? And so, as we know as marketers and branding, a lot of that is consistency. So I've got to be consistent in some core messages.
Right.
And speaking for a lot of years in a lot of places, even internationally, I have a set of core things that I embed in just about any speech because that's part of the brand. For instance, being inspirational is very important to me.
Okay.
That's a key part of what I do. And I've been doing it for a long time. So when I'm teaching, I'm inspiring. I look at it from that standpoint. I'm educating, but I'm also inspiring because I'm a living example of what this particular profession can do for you. That's the sales side of it. I tell a lot of students, look, if you learn my craft and you really learn it well, and it is something that you have to learn, by the way, it's not the gift of gab. There's a lot of science to my craft.
Sure.
If you learn it well, two things. One, you'll never be unemployed because every organization, even not-for-profit organizations, every organization needs revenue producers.
Sure.
And that's what we are. So you'll never be unemployed if you do it and you do it well. The second thing is you can stop looking for jobs because those will come to you.
Mm-hmm.
If you do it well and your name is out there, and I've got 2 children who are in sales. They're adult children. I have a daughter. My youngest daughter is at Cisco Systems. She's been there for 13 years. My son has been at Certainty for about the same amount of time, and they are in sales and sales management, and they have done it so well over a period of time. Each of them has gotten so many offers to join other organizations, and they decided to stay. And so, anyway, so I talk about that.
One other thing to add to that is that if you understand the truths that underpin sales, it makes you better at almost any other job.
It's all communications. It's all communications. Right. It's all relationship building. It makes you a better leader. All of that. You're absolutely right. But in terms of the speaking and I've got to reach some level of consistency in anything I talk about, and that's a decision on my part because that's part of my brand. I would hope that people who have heard me have walked away saying, wow, in some way I was inspired, whatever that is. Okay. So that is part of, if I look at ingredients, I put that ingredient in just about everything I talk about.
Okay.
Right. In terms of not, as I think you said, rote is the word you use. So, so when I think about it from that standpoint, if you ever watch me before I speak, you'll see me looking at the audience. I'm studying the audience.
Okay.
Right. That's important to me too. I try to adapt to whichever audience I'm talking to. Right. And so that makes it where I think in some ways I'm sort of customizing it. I might have a standard set of things I need to get across because that's branding.
Sure.
But I may do it in a different way based on the audience.
Okay.
And so that keeps it fresh. And to be honest, and any speaker will tell you this, I get a lot of energy from the audience.
Oh.
If I'm getting the energy from the audience, I'm a much better speaker.
Okay.
Right.
So when you're looking at the audience then, and you're figuring out how can I get through to these people? How can I cut through all of the things that they're thinking about, what they have to do tomorrow and all of the pressures and stresses that they might have on their minds? How can I get through all of that to actually engage with them and to do it with 2,000 of them at the same time, maybe?
Yeah.
What sorts of things do you see when you look at the audience?
It's amazing what you see. If you watch body language, again, in sales, that's part of it, right? So you're listening to what's said and not said, I mean, this is what we teach, right? What's said and not said.
Sure.
You're listening to explicit and implicit needs.
Right.
You're listening for those kinds of things. But you read body language, and it's one of those things, it's almost an occupational hazard. You do it enough, and you start watching things in a different way. My kids got that too, and their spouses talk about it. But when I'm watching an audience, I'm looking at body language. That's one thing I'm looking at. What's the sentiment in the room? And you can tell. You can really tell.
Yeah.
The other thing is I'm trying to sense the feelings that are in the room. And part of that helps feed the energy, right? Okay. And then if I find something that's humorous, and if you watch the room, usually you can find something that's humorous. If I find something humorous in the audience, I try to use that. Right? Because that helps relate to the audience.
Right.
I'll give you some examples. I've had my fair share of speaking to national sales, people in a national sales conference. And, generally speaking, I kind of know how salespeople think of their sales managers, because I was a sales guy, right? Yeah. And you kind of assess your sales manager along the way,
Right.
And it's kind of fun. That it's really a fun thing to do.
When you find out what tricks they like to use the most.
Those kinds of things, right?
Is this a takeaway guy? Like, what's his thing?
Yeah.
What's her thing?
And so when I'm speaking to a sales audience, I'm looking for that stuff. All right. And usually you'll find it. There's a salesperson that people like to tease, or a sales manager. There's someone like that in the audience. So I kind of look for it.
Okay.
And when I see it, when I get up to speak, I latch onto it and I use it, and it helps me relate to that audience. It's like, wow, he saw that too. I recently spoke to a group, I think there were 500 salespeople in the audience, and they love to tease their executive vice president of sales.
Okay.
He's a driver, so I mean he's got that kind of personality. Come on, let's get it done. Let's get it done. Anyway, and so he's got that personality, and I sat in the audience long enough for me to see that in action, right? And so when I got up to speak to that audience, I teased him about, come on, let's go.
Right.
That kind of a thing. So you see that when you're watching the audience, right? Yep. And so you do this enough, and you look for certain nuggets that you can use to add some humor to it. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the humor. I'm looking for the sense of the audience, kind of the spirit, if you will, what's going on. And if you pay attention to the audience, and that's the key, you will see what I see.
So let's move to some rapid fire. As briefly as possible, what do you consider your most valuable failure?
So I don't declare failures.
Okay.
I declare learning experiences.
Sure.
So my first dean's job was at LSU.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I was brand new to this whole thing. It was a huge learning experience,
right.
A steep curve, if you will.
Yeah.
So being a faculty member, and I'd been a faculty member for a number of years, and I know to teach my class. I know to write articles. I do those kinds of things, and once you take on a leadership role, like a department chair's role or department head's role, all of a sudden you're not looking at what you do. You're looking across your discipline at your colleagues, and you're leading them, right? And so that's a learning curve. Well, you jump up to dean, and now you have all kinds of faculty, all kinds of staff, and oh, by the way, you have a huge external audience out there that you've never necessarily paid attention to. But the role of dean is all-encompassing.
Sure.
I got to be a faculty, I've got to be a staff member, I've got to be a student, and I've got to be a representative. I mean, it's a laundry list of all of a sudden you're in that role. And the discipline didn't necessarily teach you how to do that.
Yeah.
All right. If you go to our PhD programs, no, I'm not disrespecting our PhD programs, but in a PhD program, we're taught how to do research.
Yes.
Mainly. It's, how to collect the data, how to analyze the data, how to write a paper, how to get it published. Mm-hmm. That's the focus. All right. Along the way, you might get a little bit of the teaching. Well, here's how you teach a class. Hopefully you're getting that. Nobody's teaching you how to lead a business school.
Right.
Right. And so that first one for me was a huge undertaking. It was absolutely overwhelming because I joined right in the middle of a capital campaign. And that school was just as we are. We're in a major capital campaign now, a $4 billion capital campaign. So what we're doing on a daily basis adds up, right? And so I joined them as they were right in the middle of a capital campaign. And so here I am, I'm stepping into it. I got faculty wanting to meet with me. I got staff wanting to meet with me. I have board members wanting to meet with me. I've got donors. We're right in the middle of a capital campaign, so I need to be out. Because they don't walk in with checks, by the way.
They don't? Wait a second. Hang on.
This is outside sales, right? So you got to go out and meet with the donors and have dinner with them and stay out. Those, you're building relationships.
Sure.
All that that part wasn't new to me because I did it as a salesperson. So that part wasn't new. I just had to go back to that.
Right.
But being responsible for a whole college was new. So along the way, I remember the strategic planning process. As an example. Yep. And my colleagues from LSU will probably tell you that I made a couple of errors, right? And so because I wasn't trained to do it, I reverted back to my corporate days in that first role. And I remember taking over a team, and I remember setting the priorities for the team. Yep. In business, that's what a CEO or president does. Sure. This is what we're going to do moving forward.
Yes.
Right. And in a sense, that's what I did in my first deanship. I listened to the stakeholders, as I told you. I've always done that. But I came back and I declared, here are the 5 things we're going to focus on. All right. Because I wasn't trained to be an academic dean, I reverted back to my corporate days. I thought that was going to be okay. Academia is different.
In what way?
In a lot of ways, academia is different.
So
what I learned, you've got to engage people. You've got to engage your faculty and staff. It's not telling. You can't be heavy-handed in academia. This is not a CEO's job, and CEOs are not that way anymore anyway. That's a different kind of CEO. Today's CEOs are very interactive and more engaging. We have to be. But in academia, especially so, right? Because you're trying to lead independent thinkers toward a goal.
I see.
So we are steeped in our disciplines, known best by the other researchers in the same field, by the way.
Right.
I mean, that's part of being an academic is you're building a national reputation or an international reputation in a field.
Right.
So my colleagues in sales and sales management at other universities around the world probably know me better than my own faculty in the building.
I see.
Because that's the way this is built.
Sure.
We have experts in different areas, and we kind of hang out with like-minded people, right? So when I go out to a conference, I'm hanging out with people in sales and sales management. We're talking the same language. We have lots of common interests. When I come inside the college, I also have professors in marketing doing consumer behavior, as an example. I go over to finance, and I've got people in finance doing something different. Our language is not the same. All right, so that's academia. So if all of a sudden as a dean, you walk in and you command from on high, these are the 5 things we're going to do,
right?
All right, you're going to lose your audience.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I didn't know that at first. I didn't know. So I reverted back to when I was in sales management. No. All right. So the next time I got a shot at it, which was going to University of Arkansas, the Walton College, right. I learned from that experience. And I said, this time I'm going to do it a little differently. I'm going to keep the market tour because that was really important. I need to understand what the donors are thinking, what the supporters are thinking, because ultimately we need to get resources into the college. So I start there. But I also worked with my associate dean, whom I picked, and I had her help get the breakout groups together. So we picked 5 things. That was consistent. Picked 5 things. But then we had breakout groups of faculty members and staff members working on each of those 5 things. And by the way, that college is still implementing that plan. I mean, as an example, we picked analytics as one of those things, and they're doing stuff with blockchain.
That was a good choice.
Yeah, they're doing stuff with blockchain. I mean, they're doing some incredible work over there. But I had my associate dean work with the faculty. We had working groups to come up with how we would build on those 5 things. Well, when I got here, I said, man, I could do a better job. And so I picked a faculty member who's really gifted. Her name is Dr. Mary Leah McAnally. And I had her as our inaugural director of innovation and strategic planning. Yeah. I had her really doing the legwork and getting people to these meetings, these faculty and staff meetings. And she did an incredible job, just a wonderful job. So there's an example of taking a learning experience. That's the point I was making. So my first run at it, I commanded from on high. Here are the 5 things that we're going to do, blah, 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 blah. Well, we did 3 of those things. All right. The second attempt was, okay, here are 5 things, but let's get some people involved in how we get there. The third one here was, let's start over again. This is a grassroots effort. We already know I did pick 8 things, by the way. I did show those 8 things, like I said earlier. I showed them in the first faculty and staff meeting, but then I backed off. And I said, okay, now let's start from a new place. This is a brand new thing. We're going to start all over again. We're top 20. Big picture was what I was interested in. What are we really doing at the end of the day? It's not about being a top 20 necessarily. It's about it for us advancing the world's prosperity. That's a big vision.
Right.
That gives us something to work toward.
What do you think is people's biggest misconception of you?
Of me?
Yes.
I don't know. I don't know. All I have to do is guess at it. I really don't know. I have no empirical evidence of this. No one's ever said it. And when we say people in general, I guess it would depend on who you're talking to, as it turns out. But I think in general, and it's only because I have to keep the switch on a lot. So this job is all consuming, so it's hard to turn it off. So you tend to see me in business mode a lot.
Yeah.
All right. But I'm a fun guy. I mean, I'm a musician, man. You see me around musicians, and we're hanging out and laughing. I'm a musician.
Right.
That's important because that's a critical aspect of me. And what does that mean? Is we like to have fun. We're into the music. We know the music, and if you see me playing, you see how much my wife is a singer. You see how much we're into our music,
right,
our craft, and we have fun with that. So you see that side of me, and like many of us, we're all multifaceted, right?
Of course.
So you tend to see me in business mode because, gee whiz, that's my job. That's what I'm doing, and I'm doing it for long hours almost every day. But when you see me off the clock, so to speak, and you see me playing music, or if you see me with my grandkids, that's a completely different side of me. And like, as I said, many of us are multifaceted. I just think in this role, because we have to be on so much, you tend to say that's that individual. Well, that's not all of me. That's a part of me.
I think many people have some point in their lives, and for some people that is their whole professional career. But I think for more people, there are periods of a few months, a few years where they invest in something that they find really meaningful, and they make sacrifices like the ones you're talking about, to where you take on something that's all consuming. And then at some point, I think most people decide, okay, now it's time to step away from that chapter in my life, because I think in part because there is so much sacrifice involved.
Right.
So my question then, and this is not one that was on our list, but is, do you think, what is it that drives people then to take on something like that? And you knew what this would be.
Right, sure.
So is it important to you from a legacy standpoint? Is it important? Do you find, is there a way that this job, that doing this thing for this university, for this institution, makes you there are different ways that we can feel alive.
Right.
Is there a way that this brings you to life, not more than anything else, but in a way that nothing else does?
So I can be super clear about this one.
Okay.
And trust me, I've thought about it. So, number one, I'm a professor and I love it.
Okay.
As I told you, I left what I was doing as an executive at a corporation to come back and get a PhD. It took me 4 years to do that, graduate school twice.
Right.
And it was the professor's lifestyle that was attractive. I love to teach. I love to write. So I can do the professor's job. The first opportunity for me to take on this role, it was largely curiosity.
Oh.
It was curiosity. As I said, I was called by Cornell to, hey, take a look at this. And, whoa, Cornell?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Deanship? Interesting. What is that?
Right.
What is that?
Yeah.
And I just kind of learned along the way. So the first one was largely curiosity.
Okay.
The second one, the second opportunity, wow, that was one where it gave me an opportunity to validate what I had been doing, validating why I was doing it. And that was a very special one for a lot of reasons. One, as you look at that, area of the world, there's a lot of consumer packaged goods companies around Walmart,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Sure.
So what I didn't see at first was the opportunity to sort of go back to where I started and work with these consumer packaged goods companies. They were all around that area,
Yeah.
and that became kind of a real interesting experience for me and for my wife, for that matter, for different reasons. This one was, man, this is home, and what an honor to be an alum,
Right.
being asked to come back and do this, right? And so it was just that high honor to be asked to come and do this. Now when I think about it, I'm still in it because you check that box,
right,
for the most part. But it's because of what this institution did for me.
Right.
It's that service. So this is a service role. I could always say, stop the train. I'm going to go back to the faculty and do these other things that I love doing. But it's a service thing now. It's, wow, this institution, of all the institutions, as a first-generation college student, I graduated from this place. I worked at a major market radio station. I worked for 3 big corporations in leadership capacity. And now I'm leading a top 20 public business school. This institution changed my life, right? And I try to operationalize, I try to bring it to life, what that really means. And one way I get there is, and I remember this distinctly, there was no one in my immediate family or my extended family that I could go to and talk about my calculus problem,
mm-hmm.
as an example.
Right.
And I remember that because there was no one in my immediate or my extended family that would even understand what I was asking.
Right.
Right. And I remember going through calculus and struggling with it and trying to think, where can I go for help? Right. And take that one example and multiply it multiple times.
Mm-hmm. And
that was my experience here. There are people here that affected my life. And the people in the college have heard me talk about it. I keep a list of 12 people, 12, go figure, 12 people who really touched my life, really made a difference
mm-hmm.
in my life. 8 of those 12 people some of them are still here, alive, here at A&M, and some of them have passed, but they came from A&M. 8 of the 12. They're remarkable people here. And so this is my opportunity to give back more than anything. What motivates me now, this is my opportunity to give back to the institution that changed my life.
If you could have anyone as a mentor for one day, who would it be? Now, the only caveat for this question, you may choose a religious figure, but you are a man of faith. It can't be someone from your own religion.
A mentor, huh? I'd love to have my dad back.
Yeah.
My dad had a way with words, and people in this community would know what I mean by that. He didn't talk a lot, but he made so much sense. I'll give you an example. It actually builds on what I just said a minute ago.
Okay.
As an example of my dad giving me advice as I'm going through this experience. So I remember talking to my dad one day, and I was telling him about my calculus problem. Like, Dad, I've got this calculus exam coming up, and I'm really struggling with it. And so my dad gave me what he could give me. He couldn't give me the answer to the calculus problem, but what I appreciate the most is he gave me what he could give me.
Which was?
He said, son, if success were easy, everybody would be successful. He gave me what he could. And I took that to heart, and I thought, he's right. He gave advice that way.
Yeah.
And so every day, and there's hardly a day that passes that I don't think about something that my dad left with me. And it was that wisdom. It was that really grounded wisdom.
What is your fondest memory of Texas A&M?
When I finished defending my dissertation, my family was around. In fact, I have a picture of 2 of our now adult children standing in the hallway just outside the room where I defended my dissertation.
Yeah.
And then I have a picture of my mom and dad out there too. So it became a family celebration. And this is what's special about it. They saw the struggle. I had to study for the comprehensive exam. That's like the bar exam that lawyers take. And they remember, watching me sit in a room with stacks of literature all around me, studying hard for the comprehensive exam. And I had to read a lot of material in order to pass that exam. So my children would come home, and we stayed in just 900 square feet. So we were in a small duplex, all of us in one room, it seemed. And they saw their dad doing that work, all right? They saw the intensity of it. They heard me talking it out, getting ready for the exam. And then they heard me working and getting ready for my dissertation. In fact, my children helped me package, because then we couldn't use Qualtrics and email the survey. We had to mail these surveys out. So my children sat on the floor with me and helped me mail those envelopes, prepare those envelopes and all. And my family, as I mentioned, I'm the first generation, so my family didn't know exactly what this was. They just recognized it as a lot of work. And they were there when I went into a room with professors and a few doctoral students, and I presented my ideas and defended my dissertation. And then the professors left the room, and I stood there waiting for the outcome. Well, my family was around. They were right outside waiting too. And then they watched the professors come back in the room, and they heard the professor say, "You passed. You're now Dr. Jones." My family was right there. Yeah. And I have a picture. I should have brought it. I didn't anticipate this question. But I've got a picture of 2 of my daughters tearing up.
Oh.
And one brought me roses. And well, I'm sure the whole family bought the roses, but one of my children handed me the bouquet of roses.
Right.
And that to me was just an incredible experience.
Sure.
And I can walk this is also special. I can walk that same hallway now as a dean, thinking about my time as a doctoral student. So my family shared that with me, and that is always going to be really special.
Beautiful. We end each session with Good Bull. This is an opportunity to recognize someone else for something good or great they have done. Do you have someone you would like to send some good bull?
I do. Easy. My wife.
All right.
Fern Walker Jones.
All right.
Who's also a musician. You can look her up on iTunes.
Okay.
But my wife, as I said, has been with me through the struggles, many of them. And she persevered with me as we've gone through these things. And she has now come into her own. And so, as I said, we're musicians. So she's now writing music. She's producing music. I'm so, so proud of her, because as a mom, taking care of the kids while I'm off doing my thing, and then as a grandmother, taking care of the grandkids when our kids want to go off and do their thing. She's done that for years. And then within the last year or two, we're at a stage now where the grandkids are in school. She's not necessarily having to do the parenting side of it or the grandparenting side. We're always there for our grandkids and kids for that matter, but it's not a day-to-day thing.
Sure.
And so she kind of walked into something that she's always wanted to do. So her first published song is Dare to Believe. Yeah. And it's on iTunes, Fern Walker Jones, Dare to Believe. And if you listen to the lyrics of that song that she wrote and produced, it's telling her testimony of now she gets an opportunity to do what she's always wanted to do and that she always believed that she could do. My wife.
I don't know that there's anything to add to that other than I have some good bull to send out as well. I want to thank Steve Pato, mentioned him earlier, brought me into the health markets in Sphere family, wrote a letter of recommendation for me for this business school, and Bill Saunders and Keith West and Danny Firestone as well. Thanks for making my time there special.
Yes.
So Dean Jones.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
What a great time this was.
Great. Really good questions. Thank you.
Thank you to the listeners for tuning in. We will talk with you again soon. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to stay up to date on our latest videos, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to receive notifications. If you're in a rush or on the road, you can still join us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. If you want to learn more about us or our guests, please visit our website at mays.tamu.edu/podcasts. Also, please check out Mays Business School's academic programs. They're the sponsors of our show, and you can find them in the description. Thanks, and gig 'em.